Welcome inside Black and Gold, heading into week 13. The New Orleans Saints coming off another disappointing loss where they got shut out, Jeff. 13-zip to San Francisco. So much to talk about from that game, including more mishaps in the run game, especially with a guy like Alvin Kamara, who everybody expects more from, obviously, but fumbling just hasn't been something that has been an issue for him until this season, of course.
Yeah, except for all year. Except for exactly when it's the worst, right? When it cost you games. Like the two games the Saints have lost without allowing 20 points on the scoreboard.
Yeah.
Actually, that's not true.
What do you mean?
What did they lose by to the Bucs?
10.
Yeah, what was the score?
2010, right?
Was it?
Let me double check.
It was 20-10. Yes. So that stat that I just made up, in the two games the Saints have lost without allowing 20 points or more, Alvin Kamara has fumbled and led directly to the opposing team scoring points. And this was week 3 against the Panthers where he fumbled for a touchdown, and now week 12 against the 49ers. The 49ers,
one of those teams,
for a field goal, one of their 3 scores on the day. They only had a touchdown and 2 field goals, and one of them was directly following an Alvin Kamara fumble. Against the Panthers, it was actually a fumble for a touchdown. So, like, these are games where those little mistakes, they are massive because there aren't that many points on the board, right? So, like, you could argue that Alvin Kamara was a major reason you lost both of those games, and he needs to be a major reason why you win games, But we're gonna talk more about Alvin. We're gonna talk more about, is there a crisis of leadership on this team, which is weird to say because it's a very veteran laden team, but it's really does feel like there's a leadership gap showing up somewhere. Then we're going to get into more from the film. I went through the Saints 49ers film from week 12. It was not a pleasant experience, but I feel like I've said this exact thing at least 5 times this season. It was just bad football. The Saints did move the ball. The offense did move the ball, so we can talk about that. But, obviously they didn't get into the end zone. It's just weird because they were in 49ers territory like the whole game, and they just couldn't score. If they wanted to go the Bucs route from 2020 where they just kicked a field goal late just to avoid being able to say they were shut out, they could have. They chose not to, which I think is the right move. But we'll get into some of the things I noticed in film. So we're going to get into more of that. But first, Steve, obviously you were out there in San Francisco. What was the game like? What was the atmosphere like on the sidelines? I keep waiting for the day where we have, people screaming at each other and like very clear infighting going on and fracturing. I haven't seen that, but what did you see down there on the sideline?
Yeah, definitely not the case at all, where you see any in-house strife going on. I will say that the crowd was definitely present and loud. The San Francisco faithful showed up, and I wouldn't say that the noise was a factor, but that you could definitely hear them. It wasn't as loud as ever, like the Superdome can get, but it definitely you felt their presence. I got sick and tired of hearing every time the 49ers get a first down, they do the 300 chant, they go first down 49ers, and then the fans go and that happened a lot, unfortunately. But other than some of the the injuries that happened in the game, there weren't anything where you could tell the team was struggling. There was a lot of actually animated. Some of the animated guys on the sideline were on defense, like a Shy Tuttle. You could tell him trying to fire up some guys. And I don't know, Jeff. It's weird because the team has the talent, and they just, for whatever reason, nothing seems to go their way or go right for them either, whether it's by their own doing, by the referees. Something seems to happen to spoil a drive every single time, it feels like.
Yeah, it's got to be tough for the defense. I think the defense actually played really well in that game. And
Absolutely, yeah.
like, it's like, yeah, Shy Tuttle's over there trying to fire up his defense, but it's like, oh, he's not scoring points. And, we're going to get into more from the lack of turnovers and the one that should have been, which is just crazy that play didn't happen. But we'll get into more of that. But first, I do have to say, Steve, remember when I told you that I partnered with a clothing brand and they sent me a Steelers shirt?
Yes.
Well, this time they sent me a good shirt. They sent me a Saints shirt. And it's actually nice. It's called Ultra Pro is the brand. It's a nice little shirt. It's like a baseball shirt.
Yeah.
Like
they sent you the right black and gold.
It's actually really nice. I like it a lot. I'm glad I get to wear it. And so anyone watching, anyone listening on the podcast, if you want a free shirt, I'm going to be tweeting out the details for the giveaway we're doing. So keep an eye out for that. I'm going to throw it in the show notes for this show when it's done. So if you want to go back to the recording, and we'll be giving away one to whoever wins. So they'll have the instructions on how to enter. And yeah, it'll be a nice little giveaway. We can do these every couple of months. Whenever this is this, I don't get anything out of this other than the shirt and the fact that we can give it away to one of our listeners. So that's what I thought it was an interesting little partnership we could start. And I'll throw the link for the actual like place you can go buy them. In the description too. So I'm glad they sent me the right brand or the right team.
Another step for Inside the Black and Gold, moving up in the podcast universe. Our first giveaway.
Yeah. Our next step would be having you say the name right.
What? I said Inside Black and Gold.
You said Inside the Black and Gold.
I'm gonna have to I'm gonna throw the red flag like in the commercials and go back and listen.
Well, we don't need to, because we have it recorded. We can go back. You definitely said it, and that's not the name. Anyway, sorry. Okay, so yeah, that shirt's there. Keep an eye out. There's my Twitter handle at the bottom of the screen. It's at Jeff_Nowak NOWAK. Check that out. I'm gonna post the details tomorrow morning along with the show. So keep an eye out for that. Anyway, moving on. So one of the things that I know people have been critical of regarding Dennis Allen has been his demeanor on the sidelines. And there was an interview with Mark Ingram where he talked about like, oh yeah, if I fumbled, it was an interview with Mark and Sean Payton. I can't remember who, it might have been Kay Adams. And he was talking about how like, oh yeah, if I had done that when you were on the team, oh man, and like people kind of took that as like, wow, Dennis Allen doesn't scare Mark Ingram. Like he's not putting the fear of God in these kids. And I don't know how true that is. I don't know what goes on behind the scenes. But yeah, Dennis Allen is not the most animated person, especially on the sideline. Like you don't see him getting, he'll like have these expressions, but he's never like chewing somebody out. He's never fighting with the refs. And so here's what he had to say about that. And I thought his answer in his interview this week on Monday was actually really interesting because he kind of acknowledged a lot of what people have been kind of questioning.
I don't know. I felt like I had plenty of emotion on the sideline yesterday. Look, my personality is the way that my personality is, and I think our coaching staff's personality is the way that it is. We've got to do a better job of demanding that things be done exactly right, and all of us have to take accountability for it. That's why this is a team game. So, but yeah, I don't think yelling and screaming is the answer to everything. I mean, all of us have been parents, right? Or at least most of us in this room have been parents, and I haven't found that when I yell and scream at my kids that the product changes. Usually when you teach, that's when those things change.
So a few things. One, you're talking to a room of sports reporters. You shouldn't be assuming everyone in there has kids. I would say the majority of the people in that room don't have kids. I don't have kids. I know you have a child, but
no, but I would agree. I think most people in the room don't.
There's a lot of childless people in there. And it's because like the schedule of being a sports reporter is not conducive to having kids. Either way, like I thought it was a weird thing for him to assume about the room. But the other thing is like, do you think that treating the team the same way you treat your children is the way to go about this? These are professionals. Those are your children. I don't think that I think he needs to and this is like I say this all the time. I don't think Dennis Allen understands how to communicate with the media and how what he says comes off as, because it's like that just it feels like a disconnected thought of like, no, you should not be coaching your team of professional athletes the same way you would raise your children.
I think he was
Is that
trying
a
to
bold
say that.
statement? I don't think that's a bold statement.
I think he was trying to put out there kind of that yelling doesn't
Equate to quality coaching.
equate to people learning,
Yeah.
where when someone's screaming at you, you kind of maybe, I don't want to say tune it out, but you're less likely to listen and maybe take down some pointers as something that's going to help you instead of being basically ridiculed.
No,
So I it was definitely a little awkward on how he explained that.
and I agree with that to an extent, right? Like, I don't think that you should be constantly ripping into your players. You should be trying to build them up, not tear them down. I agree with that. I'm just a big metaphor analogy guy, and that's just missed so badly that it's like, don't compare your team to your kids. Anyway, it, I do think that there is a middle ground you have to hit, and I'm not sure he hits it enough. Like the only time I can remember him really getting upset and animated, it was in training camp when you had like 3 fights within 3 days, and he like huddled
Trevor
everyone
Penny.
together and he like cursed him out and was like, play freaking football. And I was like, good. Like, that's the type of coaching that I'd like to see, because it's like when I see this team, you don't want a team to be afraid to make mistakes, right? Like, mistakes happen. It's impossible to avoid. There just seems to be this like kind of dispassionate attitude around the team. And I don't know if it's just an issue getting players fired up, but like DA said, his personality is his personality. So it's not going to change. He's not going to magically become a different person. And the question is more, is his coaching style conducive to quality, winning, comprehensive, like attention driven, attention to detail football? And you could make a real argument that it's not, based on what we have seen this season. Because, when he was a coordinator and when Sean Payton was running the show, the defense was always on point and the team itself always seemed to be on point. I'm not sure that can be said about the team this year. And, it's not all on Dennis Allen, but I do think it comes back to him at the end of the day. And while he doesn't think that kicking and screaming all the time and screaming and yelling all the time is the best option for a head coach, I would like to see it sometimes, because when your star running back is fumbling twice in key situations in a game that you should have been able to win or at least be competitive in, he should be getting chewed out on the sideline, right? Like, he shouldn't, like, that's something that should happen. And like, I get it. He's Alvin Kamara. He's a superstar. You have to cater to them a little bit. I mean, if there's not accountability for that, what is there accountability for?
Well, you pointed out obviously his record this year, and then you go back and look for his time with the Raiders. His coaching record is 12 wins, 36 losses. That's a pretty decent amount of sample size for you to it's not just a small sample size of games that he's been involved in. So I don't know. I feel like it kind of is what it is with Dennis Allen, and it doesn't appear that his style or the way he talks to his players is coming across, it's really strange, because you would think from a defensive minded guy that he'd be a lot more hard hitting and aggressive. And I don't know, we just don't see that side of Dennis Allen at all. And he obviously had the respect of this defense for years. And I'm not saying the team doesn't respect him right now, but they don't seem to be responding to him either.
I think this team really likes Dennis Allen. I think the players really like Dennis Allen. And to me, that's not in question. Like, this team likes to play for Dennis Allen. The players like to play for Dennis Allen. It's really just a question of whether the larger kind of picture of the coaching and the team cohesion is hitting its mark. And James Hurst, I talked to the media today, and I thought he had some interesting things today. Here's a bit of what James had to say.
I don't think that's on coaching. It's on the players. It seems like, everyone across the line, tight ends, have had false starts at times. And, my opinion personally is that it's a personal accountability. No coach is telling you, when to go. So that's on us. That happens on the playing field on Sundays. The coaches are not out there playing. They're not out there lining up. So it's a player accountability that, if you jump, that's on you. And we got to understand, if it's a communication issue, then that's on the people involved with whatever communication was happening prior to the snap. But that's a player issue.
And I think there's merit to that, right? Like we can't. I think it's unfair to heap all of the criticism at Dennis Allen's feet. He is the head coach, so it does eventually get to him. But there is a player element to this, right? I don't know if there's anything Dennis Allen could be doing differently that would stop your star right tackle from false starting on a 4th and 5 snap in a key moment of the game, right? Like I don't see how that is on the coaching, but it is just a question that you have to continue to answer, because you have to find a thread that you can pull to fix the issue. And these are the same players, right? Like it's not like this is a brand new roster. It's not like this is a brand new coaching staff. You look at what has changed and what is not working, and that's where you land. But I think that again, it's like, yeah, Ryan Ramczyk should hold himself to a higher standard than that. I'm sure he does, right? Chris Harris should hold himself to a higher standard than what he did in that game. I don't think that illegal contact penalty should ever be called, but that late hit out of bounds right before the only touchdown of the game that set him up at the 5-yard line, that's 100% on the 12-year veteran who should never make that play. So, I mean, fundamentally, I think there are flaws within this team. I think there's a talent deficit in key spots, and I think that there is an accountability issue. You
mentioned that hit out of bounds there. That's definitely an area, a point of the game where Dennis Allen was riled up and angered, which you would obviously expect. But yeah, and you just could feel it the way this season has been going too. After that penalty to keep San Fran's drive alive, you knew they were going to get into the end zone, and just the way they scored on that touchdown too was just absolutely ridiculous.
Well, I think that they would have had a first down either way. It was really just, instead of snapping it from the 10, they snapped it from the 5. So like they could have still scored a touchdown there with that penalty or without it. But it was just, it's like the circumstances that went into why that penalty occurred is just such a good example of like the fundamental mistakes that have been being made by this team. And that's like, if that was Alontae Taylor, right? If it was Paulson Adebo, even a second-year player, you'd been like, okay, he's a young guy. He made a mistake. He's a 12-year NFL veteran. And it wasn't close. Like, that's a foul. You can complain about a lot of the calls in that game. That wasn't one of them. That was an easy call to make. He was 2 steps out of bounds. He just pushes him. And it's like, God, man. Like, if that's a 6-0 game at halftime, it's a different feeling. Once it got to 10, you were like, I don't think the Saints are going to score 10. I think that they were going to get in the end zone once or none.
No, it definitely felt right there. It was like, oh, great. Here we go. That kind of sealed the deal right there. I feel you're totally right there.
Well, and then how they scored with Tyron, like, he got his full hand on the ball. Like, if he was a receiver, you would have expected him to come down with that with one hand.
Yeah.
He's a safety, so he's not. If he had hands like that, he would be a receiver. And the frustrating thing is, a lot of times you'll see that happen, and it's like he'll tip it up and he'll catch it, right? In this case, Juwan Jennings just happened to be falling at the perfect spot to just catch it. And goddamn Juwan Jennings. He's also the guy, if you remember, in the finale of last season when the 49ers beat the Rams, he was all over the field in that game. He's a Saints killer. He had a really good game. A guy who I didn't even know how to spell his name until until that game. There's only one J in it. It is Jauan. Interesting, right?
Yeah, not the way Jawan Johnson spells his name.
Right. Yeah, it's instead of Jawan, it's Jawan. But yeah, so I do think that there are serious questions to be asked about the coaching staff. And I know people want to see Dennis Allen fired. I don't think you're going to see him fired. Maybe in the offseason if things go very badly. He's not going to get fired midseason. You have 5 games left. It wouldn't even be worth it at this point. And I think this team understands that, it's not unreasonable for a coach to have struggles in year one.
I do think that, and I think we might have mentioned this before, that Dennis is going to have to make some changes to the coaching staff. Not necessarily himself, obviously, but you could be looking at a new offensive coordinator, obviously, with Pete Carmichael Jr. Struggling this year. It doesn't seem like there's a good game, and then it seems like 3 or 4 bad games. It just hasn't been consistent at all with this offense, and what kind of quote unquote identity. We talk about that right now, and you think the identity of this team would be to run the football and let Andy Dalton manage the game, and they really have not been able to run the football.
Oh, that would be one hell of a decision if DA went and fired himself. Like, yeah, we need to make changes.
We need changes. I'm out of here.
No, I agree. Like, I think that's where you land, right? You say, okay, we're not going to make sweeping changes on this team, but we need to find areas that we can make adjustments. And I think that, yeah, I like Pete Carmichael. I think he's a really good football mind. I don't think that he is a great fit to be the leader of an offense, right? Like, he is a coordinator through and through. And when you have a defensive head coach, you effectively need your offensive coordinator to be the head coach of the offense. And it was the main reason I didn't think he was going to get the job. And I don't think he wanted the job. Because it's like, you need that. Like, we talk about DA holding people accountable, but it's like, you don't want your head coach, who's a defensive guy who spends most of his time in the defensive meeting room, chewing out your running back over something that, he's not going to be the one who's installing the offense, right? Like, that needs to be the offensive coordinator. And I just don't know if he's a powerful enough personality, Pete, to do that, And so, like, that's where I would start. I think the defense has been fine. I actually think that they played really well in that game.
Absolutely.
And it's really just a question of, like, what is the Saints team? What is their identity? Obviously, we thought they were a running team, and they proved early on in that game they could not run the ball. And we're never going to try. I don't know what it is, but I think that's where I would start, is the offensive coordinator. And that's why I thought, like, maybe they could make a hard run at Eric Bieniemy to kind of be that guy, but they didn't. And so you kind of land back there again this year, but yeah.
But wait a minute. Why would Bieniemy want to leave?
We've had this discussion.
Okay, I was going to say, why leave Patrick Mahomes behind and then come coach Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston?
It's the same reason that you might leave Sean Payton and go somewhere else, which is, like, you want to be the head coach of the offense, right? Like, Pete Carmichael was never going to be a star offensive coordinator on Sean Payton's staff, because Sean Payton was always going to get credit for the offense. He was calling the plays. He's the offensive wizard. You're the guy. You're the guy behind him. You were his assistant. That's the same case in Kansas City. Like, one of the reasons I think Eric Bieniemy has been passed over for head coaching jobs is because it's like, well, Andy Reid calls the plays. Andy Reid designs the offense. What do you do? And yeah, so, like, that's why I would say, like, he might have made that. He clearly, I don't know if they offered it to him. I don't know if that was even on the table, but that's, he's still there.
I just find it hard to believe he'll make a lateral move with the lack of talent.
You offer him enough money, they will.
Right.
It's not lateral if you're getting a 200% raise, right? I mean, and you're not paying Dennis Allen through the roof, so you should have money to throw around that you aren't paying to Sean Payton anyway. Well, we have talked about that, like, at length, so we don't need to go into more. But I do think we've talked about this. Alvin Kamara, he hasn't spoken to the media in the last 4 weeks, and I think in the locker room after the game, he said it's on advice of his attorneys that he's not talking to the media, which I don't like that excuse.
Yeah, he said that through, media relations, basically that he's not going to speak due to his legal issues, and he's not even talking about football issues, which that makes no sense to me,
No.
especially as a team captain.
Right. He's a team captain. It is like his responsibility to talk to the press. Like Chris Olave talked to the media after the game. Kaden Elliss talked to us today. James Hurst. It's like Alvin has to answer for, it's like, I get it. He had a rough game. You got to talk to the press. Like that's your job. I'm sorry. Like, and it's annoying because that excuse is not a good excuse because what, like he's been in these interviews. We've done it already. He's going to get asked once. He's going to say no comment.
It's an ongoing legal matter.
Yeah. And then
comment.
And then the rest of the questions are going to be about something else. Like, because you're not going to keep hammering him with questions about something he's not going to answer. Because you only have so much time to talk to these guys. And I think using that as an excuse is just him dodging the media. And it's not a very team captain thing to do. Demario, I also have questions about why Demario doesn't talk to the media more often. We don't hear from Demario every week. We should be, but we do not hear from Demario every week. We've talked to Kaden Elliss twice in the last 2 weeks and have not talked to Demario.
Right. Demario has said before in losses in locker room, I talk on Mondays. Well, he didn't talk today, which was essentially Monday for the team. We had Kaden Elliss, not Demario.
Right. Like you can't be a team leader only when it's convenient for you. And like that's talking to the media is something that the team leaders are supposed to do. Sending Kaden Elliss out there to talk to us for the second consecutive week is not a good look. And I think when you look at it, when you're talking about a void in leadership, that's the type of thing that I think stands out.
I would agree totally. Just it's really disappointing too. We talked a little obviously before the show, and you hate to bang on a guy like Alvin Kamara because when he does talk, he's been fantastic. He's definitely the favorite interview in the locker room. But right now, especially after having that lousy of a game, you wanna hear from your leaders, and just avoiding them and using his legal issues as that veil is just really not becoming.
Yeah, it's an excuse. It's an excuse. The team isn't playing well, and he's bummed about it, and he doesn't want to talk about it. But it's an excuse. It's not a valid excuse. Anyway.
So yeah, I totally get too why then, that kind of trickles down to other players you would imagine. Like, well, if, Alvin Kamara, Demario Davis, these team leaders aren't speaking. Now, we didn't hear from Cam Jordan, but he's obviously was hurt last game, and he just came back this week. Didn't see him in the locker room post-game, but he's always been a guy that has stood up and taken the bullets even when things aren't, going the right way. But yeah,
I mean, he talked with a busted eye after the Steelers game, right? He wore sunglasses. Right.
But for me, when you don't have two of your top key guys, Demario Davis and Alvin Kamara, wanting to stand up and be those, the focal point for your team after those tough games, it's just not a good look, and makes people to me question Dennis Allen's leadership even more when you have players not doing this.
Well, right, like it's like you need people to be accountable, and I just don't feel like that has been the case this season. And I think you've seen the results of that on the field, where through week 12, you're still seeing the same exact disconnected type play and disconnected type activity. And it's cost you games. It's cost you multiple games. And at this point, it's like you only have 4 wins in 12 tries. That's a problem. But all right, let's wrap up that segment there, and we'll come back and talk a little about the film. It'll be a short segment, and then we'll get to the mailbag in the back end of this program. If you have questions, comments, and we have a bunch in there already, we're going to go through them. We're going to get through as many as possible. We're going to hit them rapid fire. So stick around for that on Inside Black and Gold. I have a bad habit of just ending segments and being like, but let's do it. And we're back here on Inside Black and Gold. And I just have to say, USA, because we won. I believed and we won. That's a good thing, right?
Hey, we need something to cheer about for sure.
Yeah, it was a fun game. I watched it. It was one of those games where you kind of spent the first half of the game being like, this is going to be another scoreless tie, because that's the worst thing about soccer, and it's going to happen again. And they ended up winning 1-0, which is only slightly better. But hey, we get another game. I'm sure they're going to get beaten to the bricks by the Netherlands. I'll be in Atlanta to watch that game because I'm heading out to Atlanta for the SEC championship. If anyone was wondering, that's good stuff. But this is Inside Black and Gold. We talk about the Saints, and I went through the Saints film today, and it was not a pretty picture. And the first thing I will say right now is Chris Olave needs to hold on to the goddamn ball. I mean, like, we can bitch all we want about the refs and the officiating, and they were bad. And that should have been called a catch. And if you go back to week 2, it was called a catch and a fumble. That's what drives me the most nuts is if you go back and you watch, I tweeted this, if you go back and you watch that play in week 2 where Chris Olave caught it and went to the ground and dropped it, and then the Bucs recovered and it was a fumble, it's the exact same play. The only difference is he wasn't touched. So it was a fumble. In this case, he was touched. So he should have been down by contact. So the fumble wouldn't have counted. And so the refs suck, and they still suck. They always sucked, and it hasn't changed. But you are a professional catcher of footballs. That is your job. I don't know. I want to talk to him and ask him, like, if these are drills that you do to, like, learn how to fall with the ball in your hands, because it just seems like it's just not something he's good at.
No, like we see Alvin on the balance board or doing all those crazy things with his trainer. I would imagine that Olave is going to have to hook up with somebody that's going to, whether it's those foam, bats that you have to, every time he catches the ball, or, I don't know if he can really simulate falling to the ground though.
What are you talking about? You don't have to simulate falling to the ground. You could just fall.
I know, but then they're like, oh, Chris Olave hurt his shoulder in practice falling to the ground and he's out for the season. I'm just worried about that kind of thing.
No, I'm sorry. You should be able to practice falling to the ground with a ball. I mean, like, just have Jameis throw you the ball and catch it and fall. Like, that should be a natural thing. But it's like he doesn't understand how to do it, and that's what's frustrating. Because
he just never got touched at Ohio State. I don't know.
Well, I just think in college, you when you fall, you're done. You know what I mean? Like, when you hit the ground, like that week in week 2, that fumble, even if it was called a catch in college, he'd have been down by contact. Right. So, yeah. Like, I think there, to an extent, you don't have to know how to fall because you don't have to worry about getting up. And I don't know. I mean, that should have been a catch 100% of the time. That should have been a catch. But it's like, if that wasn't a catch, then week 2 shouldn't have been a catch. I don't know. Anyway, but he's got to learn how to catch the ball. Jawan Johnson, in the last 5 minutes of that game, had the ball bounce off his hands twice. One of them was on the fumble by Alvin Kamara, but he was right there. He could have been able to corral that ball, and it would have turned a fumble into a huge play. It would have been a touchdown. And it's like
that
everything. Like, you saw that happen to the 49ers, right? Like, yes. Tyrann Mathieu made a play and popped up in the air, and they caught a touchdown. The same thing could have happened for the Saints, but they didn't do it. Like, that's the difference in that game. Right? Taysom Hill, Juwan Johnson on the next drive had a ball bounce off his face mask and he wanted a penalty. But it's like, no, just catch the damn ball. Taysom Hill had a ball bounce off his goddamn face mask. And you could say, well, why are we throwing a fade to Taysom Hill in the end zone? I'm going to say, catch the freaking ball. You're a football player. Anyway. Absolutely. You go back to the film and you look at this game, and the most frustrating thing is that the Saints very much could have won this game. It was a game they went into as 9-point underdogs and should not have had a chance to win, and did have a chance to win. The defense kept them in the game, and the offense could not get it done. And it's like, you can blame Andy Dalton if you want. It's always easy to blame the quarterback. I don't think he played that badly. He had that one really awkward thing where you, like, threw the ball at the feet of Chris Olave, and it was because Alvin Kamara came through on the zone read or whatever, the play action, and, like, the ball got bumped. And so he lost the laces and he tried to throw it. And it just was like,
oh yeah, there's that picture going around where he's throwing the ball and, the laces are on the other side. And of course, people have latched onto that and are just killing him on it.
Well, it's like, when you don't have the depth perception to see why it happened, right? Like, when you see it from the broadcast angle, it's just like, this is an NFL quarterback. What is happening?
Yeah.
And you can see, like, he, like, been like, oh no, he did, like, the what is it called? The Cobra, the disaster Cobra. What is it called? You know what I'm talking about?
This?
Yeah. What is the name for that?
Yeah,
It's
something.
like something Cobra.
You're right. It's when definitely all hope is lost, kind of thing.
Surrender Cobra is what they call it. The
Okay.
surrender Cobra. And it's just that's what he did after that. But no, I like you go through the film and and this is why
Well,
I think Jameis Winston should be the starting quarterback. Like I do. I've said that. I'm on record. I've said it a billion times. But you go back through the film and you watch this game and you're like, Andy Dalton's not the reason that they didn't get in the end zone, right? Um, so it's like you go back and you're trying to find reasons for them to bench him and go to Jameis Winston, and like he's not playing that badly. It like whether you think he should be the starter or not, nothing he did in this game is like, gonna make you feel like, oh man, he should never be the starting quarterback for this team because he's the exact same guy he was when they put him in the first time. And like they moved the ball. Like they got into the red zone so many times. They got into the red zone enough times that if all you did was kick field goals, you might have won that game.
But if Will Lutz makes them,
well, right. Well, that's the thing. So here's the thing. Like you look at kind of like the alternative reality of that game. Chris Olave's catch stands up. You don't get in the end zone where you kick a field goal. Suddenly it's 3-3, right? You go into halftime. You're down 10-3. The 49ers get the ball after halftime, and it is 13-3. Well, now when you get to 4th and 5 and you have the option of kicking a 41-yard field goal or going for it, you probably do kick it because then you're down 13-6. And, that makes sense because it's only one score and it's a 41-yard field goal instead of a 46-yard field goal. And maybe he makes it, right? Because that does make a difference. And then you get down to the red zone and those possessions, there's a lot more game pressure on the 49ers when it's like, oh man, they could tie this, And so maybe if you're not pressing, Alvin Kamara isn't desperately trying to get into the end zone there and he doesn't hold the ball up and get it popped up. I don't like a lot could have changed based on that one catch. And yeah, and it's like you make excuses all day long. It's frustrating, but like I don't know what Andy could have done differently in that game is kind of my larger point. And like maybe Jameis would have been more aggressive. Maybe you would have been able to push the ball downfield. But when you can't run the ball and the Saints could not run the ball a lick in that game, it becomes very difficult for any quarterback. I don't care who it is to move the ball. And, when you get to first and goal at the 4 and you don't feel like you can run it, when you get 4th and 1 at your own 46 and you don't feel like you can just plow ahead for a first down, you are already playing at a deficit. And that's what the Saints were doing in this game.
Yeah, that's what Chris, as your friend, was asking. Why did they throw 4 times? Exactly like you said. They couldn't run the football. And that you felt they believed that too. And that was the problem. That's like nothing they were doing was working. No matter who they were handing the ball off to, it just wasn't getting done.
Well, it looked like I'm gonna get this guy's name wrong. Talanoa. Is that how you say it? Talanoa.
Oh, and the Niners?
Yeah. Talanoa Hufanga.
Yeah, Hufanga. I know
I
definitely.
know
that's
Hufanga.
right.
I just don't want to say his first name. I think it's Talanoa. Anyway, there was a play on so Alvin Kamara's first fumble. You watch it, and I tweeted this. If you want to see it, go to my Twitter account. I got yelled at for posting game film on the YouTube channel. So it is, I think it's 1st and 10, and you are handing the ball off to Alvin. The ball is snapped at the 40. He has to make Hufanga miss at the 35-yard line. Like, and the reason is he came up late on a blitz, and you would have thought that he knew the snap count based on the timing with which he got up there. And like, it was so like no one saw him. And that was another thing. I think it was pretty loud at that point because you could see like Kevin White, Ryan Ramczyk, Traquan Smith, they were all looking in for the snap. And so he literally just ran by them blind because they had to look in to see the ball, and he just went in behind him. And so like Alvin made him miss. But I have a feeling that when you look, if you're Alvin and you're like, that you're already having to make a move in the backfield. And then it's like maybe your ball security isn't where you want because you're already out of sorts. And I have a feeling that might have played a role in that fumble. But it's like there's clearly a tip going on there. Like he knew the snap count. It was not a guess. It was too perfect to be a guess. And then he doubled down on that because on the second drive, he did it again. and he perfectly guessed the snap count and got in on a blitz, and it actually didn't. You actually got the benefit of a Taysom Hill false start, because if it wasn't a false start, he was going to tackle Mark Ingram in the backfield for a 3-4 yard loss, and you're going to be looking at 2nd and 14 instead of 1st and 15. And it's like that. The one time you can be like, oh, maybe he just got really lucky. The second time, it's like, no, he is keying on the snap count, and you are doing something that is tipping off the cadence to him. And I think that, and James Hurst mentioned this, they changed some things up after the first couple of possessions, and I think it worked because he didn't really get that perfect run in the rest of the game. But it's like that's not a good thing when you're an offense and you're like, man, they know exactly what we're gonna do and they're ready for it. And that's what it felt like in this game.
Yeah, you're talking about Hufanga. That's a guy that was a 5th round draft pick and is having a hell of a sophomore
really good.
season.
He's really good. He forced that second fumble too.
Right. And I mean, I see in here too from Chris is your friend saying Taysom Hill 4 times, hell nah, he's gonna get a TD. I don't know what makes you believe that. They were dialed in on Taysom. That might be one of the few games I've seen him actually struggle as a runner. I think he only ended up with like 2 yards a carry after that game, and he got hit hard. They were definitely locked and loaded on him, and he wasn't able to do anything.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to have seen them try, but I don't think it would have worked. I really don't. And I don't think the Saints thought it would have worked either. Or else they would have done it, because you saw them they could run it in non-running downs, right? Like you saw them have some success on 1st and 10, 2nd and long, but you would not see them have success in 3rd and short, in 4th and short, in 1st and goal, 2nd and goal, 3rd and goal. Like when the field is that compressed and they don't have and they can just crash the safeties down, you are not going to be able to run. And that was a problem. And I think part of it's Josh Andrews, right? Eric McCoy is really, 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 really good. And Josh Andrews is not. I don't want to hate on Josh Andrews. He's a backup. He's doing his job. But that's when you lose your star players, that is what happens, is you have to find ways to win without them. And not having your star center makes it really difficult to run up the middle. Right? We're not talking about getting to the edge. We're talking about 4th and 1, 3rd and 1. You want to just be able to plow ahead, and the guy you're trying to plow behind is your center. And obviously there's a guard on either side of him, and you have to pick a gap, but that makes it difficult when you don't trust the center to be a road grader like Eric McCoy has been. And I think I want to see Trevor Penning get on the field more, because I think he is an asset in those situations. I think he struggles in pass protection, and he did in this game. That face mask penalty, and I tweeted this too, it was a good call. They didn't show it on the broadcast for some reason. I don't know why they didn't show it on the broadcast, but you can see it on the All-22. He gets his hand up in Nick Bosa's face and kind of yanks him. And so it was a good call. And the flag came out long before the DPI penalty came out. So if you're one of those it's, they only threw it because they wanted to negate no, it came out first and it was the right call. But his asset in the run game, I think, is what's going to get him on the field sooner rather than later. I like James Hurst. I think James Hurst is solid, but I don't think that he's a good enough blocker in the run game. And this needs to be a running football team. And you saw how difficult things can be when you don't feel like you can run the ball, when you don't feel like you have the pieces to block in the run game on 3rd and 4th and short. And yeah, you get shut out for the first time in 2 decades when you can't run the ball.
And obviously you're going to need this run game to show up Monday Night Football, because the Buccaneers are, I don't know if they're still as stout as they were, but they usually the past couple of years have had a pretty good run defense as well. And yeah, I'm anxious to see more of Trevor Penning. And that was definitely, you mentioned that hands to the face penalty that negated the defensive pass interference, the offensive pass interference, right? Yeah. No, defensive pass interference.
Yeah.
That was a big buzzkill. And, you saw the players on the sideline at that moment, reeling from that. And obviously that those things are going to happen, but man, oh man, I'm telling you, just there's so many times where you see this team trying to put something together or have a big stop, but there's always that little minute thing that comes up and ends up hurting them. It's been really tough this season.
Yeah, and so one of those things was a illegal contact penalty that negated an Alontae Taylor interception. It would have been the first of his career, and it would have been a massive momentum swinging play in that game. And
That seemed like a BS call to me.
it was a bad call. I mean, like by the letter of the law, right? You could have called that illegal contact. But if you're calling that illegal contact, then you need to call every other play that's similar to that illegal contact. And that if you did that, you would end up calling illegal contact 40 times a game, because that's just contact. Like, it happens. It's impossible to not, and like, sure, maybe he kept him a little longer than the 5-yard line, but it was nowhere near the play. It wasn't like that was where the play went. It didn't affect the play. And that was an instance where the flag came out well after the interception. And it was kind of like you watch a basketball game and you see a guy get fouled, and then, the whistle doesn't come until he misses the layup, because they didn't want to give him an and one, but because the foul made him miss the layup, they gave him the foul. And it really felt like that. That's what it felt like. It was like, oh, well, since it got intercepted, I should call this. And it was like, so if it just bounced off his hands, maybe you get away with it. But it's like, that's not a good look. And I thought Kaden Elliss had a really interesting insight on this. And it's because of what he referenced, which fans probably remember that from last year.
Got taken away, and at the time, you don't know what it was. For all you know, it could have been the most egregious penalty of the year. But then watching it, Drew Brees posted it. I don't have social media, but the guy showed me on the plane, and it's frustrating and it hurts. And sometimes, like, at the end of the day, everybody's human. At the end of the day, everybody's going to make mistakes. I remember I had one last year against the Titans, and they took away Marcus Williams' interception because they said I hit a guy. I hit Tannehill in an egregious way, which was not true. And everybody's human. Everybody makes mistakes, and I'm just excited because I know Tay's gonna get out there and get another one, and I'm gonna celebrate double as hard this time because it's kind of in the bank for him now.
It almost sounded like he said Taysom. He said no. He said Tay's gonna get out there and get another one. But no, it's like, I'm glad he brought that up because it is very similar, and it's like officiating can be bad, but when it negates a huge play in the game, and it's a momentum swinging type play, it makes it even worse. And that's what happened against Tennessee last year. And it's a really good callback from him, because he was the guy who got flagged. And it was a roughing the passer penalty where they said he got up and hit Tannehill in the head, but he really just hit him in the back. And Tannehill went down, but it was like right as the ball got thrown. It wasn't a late hit. And the ball got tipped up. Marcus Williams came down with it for an interception. And it got negated. And instead of a turnover, it ended up being a touchdown later in that drive for the Titans in a game that the Saints lost by 2 on a failed 2-point conversion that Trevor Siemian was throwing to Mark Ingram. How's that for a memory? I didn't even look that up. But no, it's very similar. And it's frustrating when you look back and you see like how light that contact was. And then you see plays throughout the game where it's like, yeah, but you're calling that, but you're not calling this. And like, I don't think that every close call should be a penalty, but like, if you call the minimal contact one time, then you have to call it every time. You have to call it when Rashid Shaheed is going downfield and the defender literally just has his hand. They're holding hands and he can't get his arm up to catch the ball because he's holding his arm down. Like, you have to call that too. You have to call it when Chris Olave is coming around and he's trying to make a ball and you come over the top of him and knock him. Like, you have to make all of the calls. And instead, they made that call on a play that completely changed the game for the second time in the day. They made a second game-altering call that didn't have to happen. And it just, God. Like, and it's like, you can't give the Saints a pass because they put themselves in these situations. But it's just so frustrating. And it's like the state of NFL officiating is like, give us robots. I've been watching Westworld and the robots are doing really good in that. They seem to be successful. They seem to know what they're doing. Why can't they make the calls in the games? I don't know.
It's just frustrating because, too, it's nonstop against the Saints. It seems like there's so many bad calls made against this team. It almost seems personal. I'm sorry.
It does feel that way. It feels personal, just like it feels personal against Brian Kelly. who had a press conference where he was just like, "We need to stop reviewing every play. It's really annoying. I don't like it." And then ever since that point, every review has gone against LSU.
Right.
Every single
Absolutely.
one. You will not convince me that the refs aren't like, yeah, that guy. Okay, so I do want to give us one positive film note, and it is the guy that we keep heaping praise on. It's the guy we just heard from, and it's Kaden Elliss. He had 14 tackles in that game, 12 solo tackles. Kaden Elliss has been a star in the last 3 weeks of the season, and I didn't see it coming. I really didn't.
No, what's crazy too is he's filling in for the guy that was having a big breakout year, and Pete Werner too. And you just think about that. If Werner doesn't go down, we're really not seeing Ellis shine as much. So it's, this is one of those scenarios, I guess you could say, where that whole next man up mentality really came through.
No, this is a team that's identified linebackers really well. So it shouldn't be a surprise that, they happen upon this guy and they develop this guy. But it's like in a dark season like this one, you look for silver linings, and it's like, okay, Chris Olave is exactly who they wanted him to be. Alante Taylor looks every bit like the guy they hoped he was. And Kaden Elliss has shown that he can be a star. Trevor Penning, hopefully he can show up. And then, Paulson Adebo is a guy. I'm sorry?
Hunter Gillikin had another good game.
Yeah, he's finally woken up from whatever stupor he was in. But yeah, so like that's when you look at like, okay, what does this team have going for it going into next season? Obviously, they don't have a starting quarterback of the future. They don't know, but they do have a lot of intriguing young pieces that they've been able to draft. And that's why my main criticism of how this team has operated and how I want them to adjust is to stop over leveraging draft assets to move up and just start drafting the guys that you are high on. Because when they've done that, they've been successful, right? Like, I don't need you to move up and get Adam Troutman, but I need you to have a 7th round pick so you can find a Kaden Elliss, so you can find a Marcus Colston, right? Like, because if you don't have those picks and you don't make those picks, you're not getting those guys.
No, and you mentioned Troutman. That's been one of my biggest disappointments. I just don't.
He had a nice catch in this game.
Sure, one catch.
I think it was the first drive. Yeah. And then he disappeared for the rest of the day.
That's what seems to happen way too often with him. I wish we'd see more of that. And he hasn't been that big pass catching tight end that I think we were all hoping he would be.
All right, y'all. Thanks so much for listening. It's been Inside Black and Gold. Check back after the game on Monday for our post-game pod, our reaction on how the Saints are so close to the NFC South title they can taste it. Okay. What was that? Were you slurping? That was gross.
Yeah, that was like a terrible Silence of the Lambs Hannibal Lecter right there.
Yeah, this is like some weird ASMR podcast now. All right. On that note, thanks, y'all. Be easy.
Later.